A lot of open source projects might be in a bit of trouble, including the Tor project. Android development goes kind of closed source. We'll touch on what that means. Proton and Vivaldi have sealed a deal together, which is pretty interesting. And then, of course, we can not do this podcast without talking about Signalgate. So welcome to Surveillance Report 220, where we're dedicated, as always, to keeping you private and secure with the latest news in the past week. I'm Henry from Techlore.
I'm Nathan from The New Oil.
One of our amazing sponsors is EasyOptOuts. They're extremely affordable, and it's a fantastic way for you to remove your data from people searching websites. We always loved the manual method by using things like Big Ass Data Broker opt-out list, but even that list recommends EasyOptOuts if you want an automated way, and it's only $20 a year. So cancellation is easy, even if you're not satisfied. It's been shown effective by both Consumer Reports and privacy guides, and they ask for very minimal information to get signed up. So if you want to actually take a stand against data brokers, this is probably the approach that I would take, either just completely relying on it, or you can even do a hybrid approach where you can use this and the manual method for $20 a year, which is a pretty good way to speed run through that manual method that takes a lot of time. The way they do it is also pretty nice because they don't submit removal requests unless they find your information on the site first. Some of these services just mass send all your information to these sites, even if they don't have it. They also have business plans. If you have a business, I've been using them and it's been really great for me. I've been also using Optory's free plan to just double check EasyOptOuts' work, and it's been really effective. Like Optory originally found some sites and I clicked them and the record's gone by the time I go to do a manual removal. So really happy with EasyOptOuts, and I know Nate uses them as well. And that's all I have. And now the highlight story. After Trump's decree, fight for US funding for Tor, F-Droid, and Let's Encrypt. That's the headline. And so we're going to talk about this. And again, when we talk about these stories, if Biden did this, we'd be talking about it. If Putin did this, we'd be talking about it. If your favorite or least favorite president did this, we'd be talking about it because it concerns the technologies that we love and use. So the Open Technology Fund, the OTF, has filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. against the U.S. Agency of Global Media, or USAGM, and the Office of Management and Budget. In this lawsuit, the OTF is seeking a preliminary injunction to have the USAGM release the withheld funding. Context here, the OTF pulled funding for all these open source projects, which a lot of people, myself included, didn't actually know received funding from this. So the US government invests a lot of money in open source software. This is a quote from the article. Last year, Let's Encrypt, which is one of the most fundamental technologies for the internet for basic security, has received around $800,000 US in funding from the OTF. The Tor network received almost $500,000 US, and the open source Android app store F-Droid received almost $400,000 US. In total, the organization currently supports around 50 projects, including the development of the free VPN client OpenVPN. Literally so much of the tech that we love and use and talk about and recommend is directly or indirectly reliant on some of this funding. And that funding, as far as I can tell, has pretty much been pulled entirely. Just to clarify with you, Nate, did they pull all funding or like some funding?
I'll be honest, I'm not clear because so many things are happening so fast in the political space right now. I do know this is part of the whole Doge thing where he's going in. Doge isn't technically doing this. Trump is doing this. But I'm sure this is in concert with Doge because allegedly Doge is going in and auditing all these organizations and saying, hey, these guys are underfunded or overfunded. There's ways here, et cetera, right? And then Trump is theoretically acting on that. So right now, Trump's whole thing is downsizing the federal government as much as possible and eliminating as much waste and fraud as possible. And apparently he has decided that among many things, USAGM is overfunded, has cut their funding, and basically the funds were already bookmarked for these kinds of projects. And that's what the lawsuit is OTF is basically saying, look, you already owe us these funds. We've already got a plan to use them. Like they're spoken for. You can't just pull our funding.
Yeah, I'm seeing here. So the article says that the OTF had requested and not received a payment of around $650,000 US for operating costs in March. It's a very concerning story for me. It really sucks. You know, we do talk a lot about here, and we have in the past, about how open source software, it's the most transparent, people-first version of software. We've said on this podcast several times that it's a crazy concept to us that taxpayer money can be used for anything that isn't open source software for a government. And so for the government to be pulling funds away from open source projects, even if they don't mean to, or even if it's not for the projects they're using, it speaks to the appreciation that open source projects aren't receiving, that I think they need to be receiving. So this is really sad. And this is only going to put more pressure on these projects to have to rely on the community to boost them up. And as we've talked about so many times on this podcast, a lot of people do not support the projects they use, unfortunately. People really like using things for free. We get it. I use a lot of things for free as well. But if there's just one service you use and you just support it for 1 month out of the year, I promise you that is still better than the average right now. These services do not get that much money from the community. I want to just draw attention to the fact that over in Europe, the governments across most of Europe actively fund open source projects and actually use those open source projects for their own governments. Nextcloud is a good one. Matrix is a good one. There's projects that they actually believe in and like put their money where their mouth is because they know that open source projects are so important for like resiliency and owning software and having transparent software. Also for a government. Governments are about transparency. Open source software is very in line with what governments should be using.
So according to Wikipedia, and this is just the projects section, OTF funds third-party audits for all the code-related projects it supports. So this is a great way for projects to get audited. It offers to fund audits of non-OTF supported projects that are in use by individuals and organizations under threat of censorship and surveillance. Notable projects in the past include CryptoCat, Common Wireless, TechSecure, Global Leaks, MediaWiki, OpenPGP.js, NitroKey, Ricochet, and Signal. And they also match donations to get TrueCrypt audited. As of 2014, they had reported that they had funded more than 30 technology code audits over the past 3 years, identifying 185 privacy and security vulnerabilities in both OTF and non-OTF funded projects. So, I mean, regardless of how you feel about the OTF, the government, Signal, they are clearly doing helpful work in the open source community. And these are grants. This is no strings attached money. Tor has revolutionized the internet. Let's Encrypt, literally, every expert I know who knows about the internet and cybersecurity agrees like Let's Encrypt was instrumental in building the modern internet. Let's Encrypt is what made the internet go from largely unencrypted on HTTP to HTTPS, which is now on, according to Google, over 95% of websites. And HTTPS is what enabled things like e-commerce, logging into websites safely. Like literally the internet as we know it was shaped by the rise of Let's Encrypt. You can have your opinions on Trump and Doge and all that stuff, but I don't understand how anybody who values privacy and security can think this is a good thing, but I'm sure there's some conspiracy theory floating around. I'm with you. I think this is really unfortunate, and it underlines what we have said for years, which is if you have disposable income, please help support these projects, even if it's once a month. Like donate to Tor for 1 month and then donate to F-Droid the next month. Donate to Let's Encrypt the month after that, or, you know, things like that.
Even giving this the benefit of the doubt, like let's say this is a mistake. They just screwed up, or this is still very unacceptable. Like even as a mistake, you can't just like, oh, sorry, we didn't pay out our $600 million bill that we were supposed to give you guys.
Yeah, which is 600,000, which again, even if, okay, look, nobody is disagreeing that there is waste in the government that should be eliminated. Absolutely nobody's disagreeing with that. But like $600,000, we spend 10 times that before breakfast on any given day. This is money that is going to good, tangible things. Like sometimes it's easy. I disagree with it, but it's easy to look at things like NASA and be like, how does this help us? And you should look it up, actually, because there are some surprising things that have come from space research, like, you know, refrigeration, for example. But these are things that we can look at and tangibly be like, wow, Let's Encrypt has made the world a better place. F-Droid has, whether you like it or not, helped contribute to competition. Tor has helped improve privacy around the internet. OpenVPN, like these are tangible things that have had positive impacts in the world. And that is so little money, like $600,000 for the federal government is a rounding error. And I know the point is to like get rid of the waste, but my point is like we have that money. That is money that should definitely be spent here, in my opinion. And I don't know how people can defend that one, to be honest. So I hope you're right, Henry. Like I know you're saying like best case scenario. I hope you're right that this was a mistake and that this does get reversed, because I'm telling you, this will come back to bite us. And for the record, mildly political. I feel that way about a lot of things that are happening right now, but I feel like this one's pretty unarguable. Like this will come back to bite us if this doesn't get reversed.
I think it's anti-American to do this. I mean, this is putting organizations that need funding to exist and benefit society in a position where they might feel like they can't get support here. I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing about these projects migrating to Europe or Canada because they're going to get funding there. And it's anti-American. Like it's literally anti-American to do this. Like you're chasing away some of the best talent and the people that are making the internet a fair place. So this is not coming from like an anti-American viewpoint. It's coming from a viewpoint of like, well, we want these people to be successful and we want them to do what they do and bring good technology to people. If they keep getting this kind of treatment or their funds are on the line, I don't blame them for leaving and like moving to organizations to other countries.
The government right now, mark my words, and this is privacy related, Trump is going to push to privatize a lot of things. And I know a lot of you guys are probably like, yay, competition, private, free market, whatever, whatever, whatever. But what Henry was saying earlier, and I agree with him, I've said this on the podcast too, like it blows my mind that we can spend government money on proprietary code that nobody is allowed to look at, is a total black box. Like if you guys have never seen it, there's a great documentary on HBO called Kill Chain. And it's about election machines and election security. In the documentary, they go and they pick up a bunch of these voting machines on eBay, which first of all, you're not supposed to be able to do that. That's a problem. Second, they find all these vulnerabilities. And then when they try to report them to the company is just like, nuh-uh. Our stuff is secure. Those vulnerabilities, like they just ignore them. They stonewall them. They threaten them. They deny it. It's like they don't have any interest or incentive to improve. So where I'm going with this is Trump is pushing to privatize the government, or will push, this is my prediction, will push to privatize a lot of things that are currently handled by the government, which means that a lot of these things are now going to become even more proprietary, even less transparent. And that goes for code, software, privacy, surveillance. Like it's already a pain in the ass to get freedom of information requests about ongoing surveillance stuff. It's going to get 10 times harder. I'm trying really hard to be as neutral as I can, but I'm telling you, like, regardless of how pro-Trump somebody who's listening to this might be, these are the kind of, at bare minimum, these are the things that concern privacy and you should be really worried about. And for the record, I would argue there are other things too, but as far as privacy related stuff, this is the stuff that you should very easily be able to draw a line in the sand and go, this is not okay. All right, so that'll take us into the data breaches. And this first one's a little bit long, but it is technically a data breach, and it is full of valuable information. So this comes from Troy Hunt of Have I Been Pwned? For those of you who may be joining us, it's a website that compiles a list of email addresses that have been caught in data breaches. Troy Hunt posted this that said, "A sneaky fish just grabbed my MailChimp mailing list." He told the story in detail in chronological order, so I tried to just grab the relevant parts. But he says, a MailChimp fish has grabbed my credentials, logged into my account, and exported the mailing list for this blog. And then there's a screenshot of an official looking email with the headline, quote, "Sending privileges restricted." And then it says, "Hello, we're reaching out to inform you that your MailChimp account's sending privileges have been restricted due to a spam complaint received on March 24, 2025. We take these reports seriously to maintain a safe and trusted platform for all users. Please review your recent campaign and audience list to ensure compliance with our policies." And then there's a big button that says review account. He says, "I went to the link, which is on MailChimp-sso.com, and entered my credentials, which crucially did not autocomplete from 1Password. I then entered the OTP and the page hung. Moments later, the penny dropped and I logged on to the official website, which MailChimp confirmed via a notification email, which showed my London IP address because he was in London for a conference. He said, I immediately changed my password, but not before I got an alert about my mailing list being exported from an IP address in New York. After that, he also got one that said login from New York. So he says this was obviously highly automated and designed to immediately export the list before the victim could take preventative measures. There are approximately 16,000 records in that export containing information that MailChimp automatically collects." He goes on to say, just kind of a little peek behind the curtain of what was stolen. "Every active subscriber on my list will shortly receive an email notification by virtue of this blog post going out. Unfortunately, the export also includes people who've unsubscribed." And then in parentheses, he says, "Why does MailChimp keep these? So I will need to work out how to handle these ones separately. I've been in touch with MailChimp." He says, "Every morning when I'm home, I head into a radio station and do a segment on scams. It's consumer facing, so we're talking to the quote unquote normies. And whenever someone calls in and talks about being caught in a scam, the sentiment is the same. I feel so stupid. That, friends, is me right now. Beyond acknowledging my own foolishness, let me proceed with some thoughts. Firstly, I've received a gazillion similar fishes before that I've identified early, so what was different about this one? Tiredness was a major factor. I cut it out, but he talks about, again, he's been traveling internationally for these conferences and stuff, and he's like, I was tired, I got home, I wasn't thinking clearly, things like that. He says, secondly, reading it again now, it's a very well-crafted fish. It socially engineered me into believing that I wouldn't be able to send out my newsletter, so it triggered fear. But it wasn't all bells and whistles about something terrible happening if I didn't take immediate action. It created just the right amount of urgency without being over the top. Thirdly, the thing that should have saved my bacon was the credentials not autofilling from 1Password. So why didn't I stop there? Because that's not unusual. There are so many services where you've registered on one domain and that address is stored in 1Password, and then you legitimately log into a different domain. And then he says, unfortunately, MailChimp doesn't offer phishing-resistant 2FA. By no means would I encourage people not to enable 2FA via OTP, but let this be a lesson as to how completely useless it is against an automated phishing attack that can simply relay the OTP as soon as it's entered. As a last note, he notes that his mail client, which was Outlook for iOS, I believe, didn't render the full sender email. It just had like the display name. After he switched devices and he was on a client that did show the whole email address, it was very obviously not MailChimp.
Stream Elements has disclosed a third-party data breach after a hacker's leaked the data. If you haven't heard of this, it's a popular cloud-based streaming platform. It's like StreamYard, I think. The statement comes after a threat actor uses the name victim claimed to have stolen the data of 210,000 customers on March 20th, 2025. The threat actor also shared samples of the stolen data, which included full names, addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses. The threat actor says they stole data from that system, which consists of user data from 2020 until 2024. As of yet, Stream Elements has not started sending data breach notifications to impacted users and noted that an investigation is currently underway. Notably, the threat actor's post on breach forums has now been deleted.
Retail giant Sam's Club investigates Clop ransomware breach claims. So for those of you who have not heard of Sam's Club, it is a warehouse retail, mostly groceries. It's kind of like Costco, if you've ever heard of that. And it is owned by Walmart. They have over 600 clubs with millions of members across the US and Puerto Rico, almost 200 additional locations in Mexico and China. The company didn't provide additional details regarding the ongoing investigation, and the Clop ransomware gang added a new Sam's Club entry to its dark web leak site on Friday. The group has yet to publish any proof of the breach, and so far the threat actors only said on their leak site that the Arkansas wholesaler, quote, doesn't care about its customers, it ignored their security, unquote.
Oracle Health Breach has compromised patient data at US hospitals, and they're formerly known as Cerner, and this is a healthcare software as a service company offering electronic health records and business operation systems to hospitals and healthcare organizations. Oracle Health has not yet publicly disclosed the incident, but in private communications sent to customers and from conversations with those involved, Bleeping Computer confirmed that patient data was stolen in the attack. Oracle says that the threat actor used compromised customer credentials to breach the servers sometime after January 2022 and copied data to a remote server. The stolen data may have included patient information from electronic health records, but multiple sources told them that the patient data was stolen during the attack. So I got this mixed up too when I was reading this. So Oracle, not Oracle Health, this is an update to an old breach on this podcast. Oracle customers have confirmed data stolen in alleged cloud breach is valid. Despite Oracle originally denying a breach for its federated SSO login servers and the theft of 6 million people, Bleeping Computer has actually confirmed with multiple companies that the associated data samples shared by the threat actor are legitimate. Last week, a person named Rose87168 claimed to have breached the servers, and they began selling the authentication data and encrypted passwords, which is kind of the backstory to this. And then this denial, however, contradicts the findings. So that's kind of the update here.
And last story, this one is also an update. The UK fines software provider £3.07 million for 2022 ransomware breach. So this was the Information Commissioner's Office, and they have issued the fine on Advanced Compute Software Group Ltd. Limited for a ransomware attack that exposed the sensitive personal data of 79,404 people, including the National Health Service patients. The cyber attack was announced in early August 2022 when various NHS services, including 111 emergency services, suffered significant outages, pointing to a breach at British managed service provider Advanced. Advanced provided NHS with various patient management and health-related products such as Adastra, CareSys, CareNotes, Odyssey, CrossCare, Staff Plan, and eFinancial. Today, the ICO has announced the hefty fine, which comes out to 3.95 million American dollars, as a penalty for failing to safeguard sensitive data and systems. And this is significant because it is the first fine in the UK imposed on a data processor rather than a data controller.
And now we're going to go into the company section. And this one definitely got a lot of traction. So I don't think any of you missed this if you're keeping up with the news. But genetic testing company 23andMe has declared bankruptcy. So on Sunday, the genetic testing and heritage company 23andMe, aka just a DNA collection company, announced that they entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy and are asking a court to arrange its sale. At stake, though, is the fate of genetic data from the company's 15 million customers. The company has secured enough funding to continue operations while a buyer is found, and even though US law limits how genetic data can be used, the pending sale has raised significant privacy concerns. The former CEO, one of the company's founders, is convinced there is still a viable business there and has been interested in taking the company private for some time. Its sale might provide her the opportunity to do so, provided she can line up the finances for it. And given the business challenges, it's not clear what other buyer might be interested in 23andMe as a company, raising the prospect that the former CEO will be outbid by someone who's interested in the company's primary asset, which is the genetic data of 15 million people around the globe. Within the US, the use of this information is limited by the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, which prevents its use in health insurance decisions and employment, but plenty of other uses may potentially be legal, and customers from overseas may have far fewer protections.
Google makes Android development private, will continue open source releases. So, quoting the article, Google has confirmed to Android Authority that all Android development work going forward will take place in Google's internal branch. This is a shift from the way Google has worked on Android in the past, which featured frequent updates to the public AOSP branch. Anyone can access AOSP, which for those who don't know is Android open source project, but the internal branches are only available to Google and companies with a Google Mobile Services license, such as Samsung, Motorola, and others. According to the company, it is making this change to simplify things, building on a recent change to trunk-based development. As Google works on both public and private branches of the Android, the two fall out of sync with respect to features and API support. This forces Google to tediously merge the branches for every release. By focusing on the internal branch, Google claims it can streamline releases and make life easier for everyone. When new versions of Android are done, Google says it will continue to publish the source code in AOSP as always. Supposedly, this will allow developers to focus on supporting their apps without keeping track of pending changes to the platform in AOSP. Licensed OEMs, meanwhile, can just focus on the lively internal branch as they work on devices that can take a year or more to launch. This change to private development doesn't come out of the blue. Android feels less open today than it did in the early days. For example, Google has been moving Android features from AOSP into closed source packages for years. This gives Google greater control over the platform while also making it easier to update core components without a full OS update. Currently, most Android development takes place in the internal branch, but a handful of components like Bluetooth and the kernel are developed in the open. They'll be moving internal under the new system. This change will undoubtedly make development easier for Google's team, but it could limit how much we know about Android before new versions are official. Sometimes the tidbits that appear in AOSP can point to upcoming devices, feature removals, or changes to app support. We may not be getting those insights anymore, and consequently, there won't be as many opportunities for devs and users to challenge Google before it rolls out an unpopular change.
Apple Maps look-around cars will now also take photos to help train Apple Intelligence models. If you are already annoyed by Apple re-enabling Apple Intelligence every update, well, even if you don't have an iPhone, you get to be a part of the system too. There are Apple Maps survey cars that you may have seen in your area before. As they drive around, the cars take photos and 3D scans to generate ground truth data that can be used to improve map accuracy and offer features like Look Around, which is Apple's equivalent of Google Street View. But now the data collected from these cars will also have another purpose. So in an updated disclosure on the Apple Maps image collection website, Apple says that starting this month, imagery from its vehicle surveys will also be used to train generative AI models like those used for Apple Intelligence features like Image Playground and Cleanup. Apple protects the privacy of individuals while collecting these photos. This includes blurring any visible faces or license plates. The blurred versions are what will be contributed to the AI data sources.
All right, that'll take us into research. JP Morgan says that quantum experiment generated truly random numbers. So, quick piece of context for those who don't know, randomness is actually really hard. I would argue not just in computers, but in general, but specifically in computers need a program to run, and they need a seed. I mean, I'm struggling to simplify it any more than that. They need some kind of seed to build off of. There's like a million ways to do it, but at the end of the day, it's not really random. It's like it's taking this one thing, and then it can run it through a bunch of complicated math that makes it seem random, but it's really not at the end of the day. So with that out of the way, yeah, JP Morgan says that no, we've found true randomness. Researchers created the sequence using a quantum computer built by Honeywell's Quantinuum, according to a paper published in the scientific journal Nature on Wednesday. JP Morgan researchers, along with Argonne and Oak Ridge National Laboratories and the University of Texas at Austin, then became the first to prove mathematically that they had produced genuine randomness. Applications could ultimately include more energy-efficient cryptocurrency, online gambling, or any other activity hinging on complete randomness, such as deciding which precincts to audit in elections, or they completely blew past like cybersecurity, generating seeds, codes. This actually has a really big impact on privacy and security if true.
All right, and now we're going to go into politics. And I get Signalgate this week. Trump administration accidentally texted secret bombing plans to a reporter. So a prominent journalist knew the U.S. military would start bombing targets in Yemen 2 hours before it happened in March 15th because top Trump administration officials accidentally included the reporter on a Signal text chain, we'll just call it a Signal group, in which they discussed the war plan. And this was Jeffrey Goldberg, who was the journalist. First off, I just want to say, if you haven't read the article or seen the screenshots yourself, I would definitely do that to kind of just, I think one thing is like covering the story, another one's actually seeing the group chat and what it looks like and being like, whoa. It's just interesting. So using Signal in this way may have violated US law, Goldberg wrote. Conceivably, Waltz, by coordinating a national security-related action over Signal, may have violated several provisions of the Espionage Act, which governs the handling of national defense information, according to several national security lawyers interviewed by my colleague. Now, the reason for this, I've been seeing a lot of questions. They're saying it's not secure enough to deal with classified information. Not necessarily. What they say is that Signal is not an authorized venue, mainly because of the feature that makes messages disappear after a set period of time, which raises questions about whether the officials may have violated federal records law. So it's less about necessarily leaking the data, though of course the ironic part is they did leak the data to someone, but it's more about being able to keep records and actually doing this in an official government place that's assigned by the government. If you read the story itself, Goldberg, the journalist, didn't know for sure if this was a phishing attempt, if this was fake, and so they just watched to see what would happen, and sure enough, it was legit. And so they went ahead and posted it, and they eventually, I think, shared the entire chat group. The journalist specifically said it is not uncommon for national security officials to communicate on Signal, but the app is used primarily for meeting planning and other logistical matters, not for detailed and highly confidential discussions of a pending military action. On the plus, Wired went forward and said that this is the largest surge in Signal usage. So
In the US, at least. I don't know about overall, but in the US for sure.
got it. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So
Meta settles UK right to object to ad tracking lawsuit by agreeing not to track plaintiff. So a human rights campaigner named Tanya O'Carroll has succeeded in forcing social media giant Meta not to use her data for targeted advertising. The agreement is contained in a settlement to an individual challenge she lodged against Meta's tracking and profiling back in 2022. O'Carroll had argued that a legal right to object to the use of personal data for direct marketing that's contained in the UK and EU data protection laws, along with the unqualified right that personal data shall no longer be processed for such a purpose if the user objects, meant that Meta must respect her objection and stop tracking and profiling her to serve its micro-targeted ads. Meta refuted this, claiming its personalized ads are not direct marketing. The case had been due to be heard in English High Court on Monday, but the settlement ends the legal action. She said, quote, "It's a bittersweet victory. In a lot of ways, I've achieved what I set out to achieve, which is to prove that the right to object exists, to prove that it applies exactly to a business model of Meta and many other companies on the internet, that targeted advertising is in fact direct marketing, and I think I've shown that's the case, but of course it's not determined in law. Meta has not had to accept liability, so they can still say they just settled with an individual in this case," unquote. O'Carroll said she is unable to disclose full details of the tracking-free access Meta will be providing in her case, but she confirmed that she will not have to pay Meta.
UK, we're going to stay in the UK, has its first permanent facial recognition cameras installed in South London. So these are 2 cameras. They'll be installed in the city centre in an effort to combat crime, and they will be attached to buildings and lampposts on North End and London Road. According to the police, they will only be turned on when officers are in the area and in a position to make an arrest if a criminal is spotted. The installation follows a 2-year trial in the area where police vans fitted with the camera have been patrolling the streets, matching passerby to its database of suspects or criminals, leading to hundreds of arrests. The Met claims the system can alert them in seconds if a wanted wrongin is spotted, and if the person gets the all clear, the image of their face will be deleted.
All right, and now for some bad news. Secure encryption and online anonymity are now at risk in Switzerland, of all places. So Switzerland is considering amending its surveillance law to expand into new types of monitoring and data collection. The changes, which experts argue will put people's anonymity and secure encryption at risk, would widen the net of impacted service providers to virtual private networks, VPNs, messaging apps, and social networks, having previously only impacted mobile networks and internet service providers. Consultations are now public and open until May 6, 2025, so if you want to leave comments, please, please, please do, especially if you are a Swiss citizen. Speaking to TechRadar, NimVPN has explained how it's planning to fight against it alongside encrypted messaging app Threema and Proton. The amendment aims to expand the number of service providers targeted to include so-called, quote, derived service providers, unquote. This categorization would aim to include any online service with a turnover of $100 million or more than 5,000 active users.
Hungary has banned Pride events and plans to use facial recognition to target attenders. MPs in Hungary have voted to ban Pride events and allow authorities to use facial recognition software to identify attenders and potentially fine them. So the nationwide ban passed by 136 votes to 27 after it was submitted to Parliament 1 day earlier. It amends the country's law on assembly to make it an offense to hold or attend events that violate Hungary's contentious child protection legislation, which bars any depiction or promotion of homosexuality to minors under the age of 18. Organizers said they plan to go ahead with the march in Budapest, despite the law's stipulation that those who attend a prohibited event could face fines up to 200,000 Hungarian forints, which is a little over 400 euros.
That'll take us into the free and open source software section, and we're going to start with a couple stories from Proton. So the first one is very quick and pretty self-explanatory. The headline says Proton Drive and Docs now support collaboration with users without Proton accounts. They go into detail in the article, but I mean, that's really it. Like now you can edit documents and collaborate with people who don't have Proton accounts, which is pretty neat. What I thought was particularly interesting that wasn't in the headline is you can also do collaborative folders where people can upload files. So, and then the next one is Vivaldi integrates Proton VPN into the browser to fight web tracking. Vivaldi is very, very popular. For those of you who don't know, it's a fork of Chrome. They have announced the integration of Proton VPN directly into the browser without requiring add-on downloads or plugin activations. With Vivaldi being based in Norway, the partnership takes on a European angle aimed at challenging US tech giants and dominance on the web. Users of the Vivaldi browser must upgrade to the latest version and create a Vivaldi account, so that is unfortunate. The new tool is made available via the toolbar where the new VPN button is added. By default, the integration is free without time or bandwidth limits, ads, or trackers. However, there are some limits on speed and server selection in the free tier, so it's literally the free Proton tier. Users who wish to enjoy all of Proton's features can upgrade to a paid plan to unlock faster speeds, extensive server selection, and support for additional devices. And then, of course, it's worth noting, unlike the standard VPN client, this integration does not provide protection for network traffic outside the browser.
I'm going to go ahead and touch on Mullvad. There are two Mullvad stories. The first one is that their data feature, version 2, is now available on all platforms. That is DAITA, which is an acronym for their feature where they essentially add noise to your web traffic to prevent any kind of snooping on your VPN that could be used from traffic analysis. If you want the technical details, their blog goes a lot more into that, but to save time, I'm just going to go to the update, which is that version 2 just makes this more private, more secure, and better speeds. When a user activates version 2, Mullvad servers randomly select and assign a dynamic configuration to the VPN connection, and this configuration affects how both the client and the VPN server insert dummy packets. So two clients visiting the same web page will now produce different in-tunnel data streams, which carry through to the tunnel transport layer, resulting in VPN tunnels with unpredictable characteristics despite transporting the same data, which is really nifty. And another Mullvad update is that multi-hop is now available on Android. So you can now go through multiple servers in one VPN connection on Android in 2025.1 for the version number. And they specifically say that please note, depending on the location, this could potentially degrade your network performance.
The next story is about the Linux kernel. 6.14 has been officially released. This is what's new. And I am not going to lie, this article is basically a non-stop list. Driver support, audio this, frame rate, like all kinds of everything. So I'm not going to quote it. We're just going to focus on specific privacy and security things, which is a fairly short list, specifically privacy and security related. We have support for SE Linux extended permissions. I'm not sure if this one's actually security related or not, but it says it concerns memory, so I think it possibly is. A new C group controller for device memory, SHA-512 support for signing kernel modules, and more Rust updates for building the kernel using only stable Rust features. And again, everything else in there is super interesting if you daily drive Linux. So if nothing else, I recommend at least like perusing it, like different CPU compatibilities, all kinds of cool stuff. This release is stacked like pancakes. It's awesome. And then the next one is pretty short. Also, Henry added a couple that I don't know anything about, so I'm going to take this last one and let him take those two. NT Photos version 1.0 is officially out. So if you've been using NT, version 1 is officially out, and the relevant line from the article, V1 was the arbitrary checkpoint we had in mind where we could tell the world that the product was mature enough to be recommended to everyone. So if for any reason you were holding out on checking out NT, definitely check that out. And again, Henry has also interviewed their creator if you want to know more about that project and the people behind it.
Vishnu talks pretty fast, but he says good stuff. That was a common comment, but it's a good interview.
The only person that talks faster than me.
Ente.
I apologize in advance. I'm not going to remember that.
Just to specify what's new in V1, I got release notes from Vishnu. Pretty much there's a new icon. There are memories now, which has spotlights for people, trips, and celebration. You get home screen widgets, which is pretty exciting. And the free plan is increased from 5 to 10 gigabytes for free. So if you ever wanted to try it for free, that's a little bit easier to do. And they also updated family plan limits, bulk edit and shift dates, new photo viewer on desktop, and some other improvements, as well as their update to self-host Ente with a single command. And they have a little blog post on how to do that on their site. I added a couple here. I don't always share Cake Wallet news on the podcast. I run marketing for Cake Wallet, but I don't always just show every update. But this one is genuinely pretty cool because a lot of our audience likes Monero, but Cake Wallet has background sync now for Android. So you can literally just like set Cake Wallet to either update automatically your Monero wallets daily, hourly, or aggressive, which does every 15 minutes. You just update the Android app and then you go into your menu, tap connection and sync, and then background sync. And then you can go ahead and enable that and have fun with it. And then you never have to wait 10 minutes to update it, which is obnoxious. The other big exciting thing is that Tuda's 11th birthday was yesterday, 2 days ago at the time of recording. And they have a deal going on right now. I think it's like 62% off their first year if you're a new customer. So if you were looking at Tuda, that's a deal they're running right now.
I think that's only on like their highest plan, for the record. I could be wrong. But also, I think both Techlore and The New Oil have affiliate links. Just if anybody wants to help us out a little bit, feel free. I always got to show those.
And we had no misfits this week, so we're just going to go ahead and start saying goodbye. Again, open source software, a lot of the stuff that we use, love, and talk about could be in trouble. We're still seeing how that's going to unfold. Android development has in some ways gone a little bit more closed source. AOSP is still open source, but the development is definitely losing transparency. Proton and Vivaldi have teamed up, and then of course Signalgate. We definitely have to talk about that one, and we hope that our coverage was good.
All right, so our sponsor this week was EasyOptOuts. Many of you may or may not be aware your data is, especially if you live in the US, is probably pretty easily available online. There's a lot of variables that go into it. Some people I've seen don't have much out there, but most people do. You know, quick search of your phone number or your email address, or, you know, especially if you have a unique name, like you'd be amazed what pops up. There are many ways to remove that. There's kind of two main ways. Either you can get an automated service or you can do it manually. Manually is definitely the most effective, but my God, it is tedious and it takes a while and you really have to stay on top of it. Or you can go the automated route, and there's definitely a lot of snake oil out there, but there's also a few pretty good options that are trustworthy and stand out, and EasyOptOuts is one of those. And one of our favorite things about them is how affordable they are. They're only $20 a year. That is like 10% of what most places charge, or maybe 20%. Cancellation is easy. If you try it out and you're like, man, this place sucks, they missed a bunch of stuff, like whatever, they offer refunds if you're not satisfied. So you really have nothing to lose by trying it. Both Consumer Reports and Privacy Guides have tested them out. They have found them effective. Both of them explain their methodology if you want to check it out. And Privacy Guides especially, they admit like, look, this isn't perfect. We only used a couple people, but it was really promising results. So you can check those out if you want to know more. They ask for very minimal information. They're not asking you to give up any information that isn't already publicly available. And they're using that so that they can find your profile, not, you know, resell it to somebody. There's only 2 employees, so they're not sharing your data with a bunch of employees or third-party contractors. There are no ads or analytics on the platform. They do not submit removal requests unless they've actually found your data. Like a lot of data removal services will do that. They just spam everybody and it doesn't work very well. They're adding new sites all the time. And last but not least, they do have business plans. So if you are looking for some kind of perk to offer your employees or something like that, definitely hit them up and ask about that. Again, thank you to EasyOptOuts for sponsoring us. We're really happy to work with them. We're very grateful for their support. And definitely, if you are looking for a solution for your data being online, check them out.
That's really it. So just the final few things before we let you all go. Just wanted to thank you all for listening. As always, the links to the stories can be found in the show notes. And if you ever find a story, you can send it to the email on our website. And don't forget to share the podcast. You know, privacy is better when more people are private, and the people around you also are taking privacy seriously. So the more people you can get listening into even some of these stories, the better. If you feel weird sending a 40-minute podcast to one of your friends or family, you can always just send an individual clip from our Clips channel where we take some of the main stories and send it there. I'm sure Signalgate will be one of those stories. And that's really it. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.